So welcome again. And I am Sue Rushworth. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I am honored to be the current president of the Domestic Violence Roundtable. We've been in operation now for about 23 years, and it's a very vital, very active organization, volunteer-run, volunteer-led, nonprofit. And if you would like to know more about us, I won't go into great detail now. Suffice to say, you'll find the address of our website in the chat. And I encourage you to go and read about us if you don't already know. I'll get one mention of a program coming up. We are in conjunction with the Wayland Free Public Library, the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund, and SOAR for Justice. We are co-sponsoring, the Roundtable is co-sponsoring the Town of Wayland's Human Rights, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee, who are organizing a program on Tuesday, November the 16th at 7, Domestic Violence as a Human Rights Issue. And again, you'll find more information about that in our website, on our website. And if you have any questions, you'll use the chat, I know. And if you have any questions unrelated to today's meeting, you'll find also in the chat at some point our email address, and you can contact us there. So without any more ado, I will actually introduce our speaker today. It's so good to see her. I haven't seen her for a long time, and it was a delight to see that warm smile. Molly Pistrang-Gomes has been the Youth Education Specialist for REACH Beyond Domestic Violence since 2017. In her role, she works with middle and high school communities to build their capacity to foster healthy relationships and prevent intimate partner violence. And this includes teacher trainings, individual consultations, curriculum support, parent and community events, and classroom workshops for youth and student clubs advising their work. She uses trauma. She views her work through a trauma-informed lens to build social emotional skills, teach dynamics of healthy and unhealthy and abusive relationships, disrupt systems of power and oppression, and model support and accountability. We are very lucky to have Molly here with us this afternoon. And as I say, I'm delighted to see her. So with that, I will turn the remainder of the program over to Molly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue, and welcome, folks. It's really lovely. I'm also seeing some familiar faces who I haven't seen for quite a long time. So it is really lovely to be here with all of you. So we're going to get started, and today what we're doing, we're going to be talking about talking. So today our conversation is called It's Not the Talk, it's an ongoing conversation, talking with youth about friendships and relationships, as Sue said. So my name is Molly Pistrang-Gomes. I use she, her, and her pronouns. I'm a youth education specialist for REACH. I'm happy to be here with some of my colleagues as well, to be here with the roundtable. So as we get started, just wanting to frame our conversation in a couple of ways. The first thing, just really, we're going to be talking about young people. We're going to be talking about relationships. Things come up for us, and I just really want to frame this conversation by naming and encouraging us to notice how we're feeling. So as we're having these conversations, notice physically how you're feeling. Are you feeling energized, exhausted, hungry? It's the end of the day. Where are your thoughts? Are they racing? Are you just standing? Are they standing still? I have a standing desk, so I want to say that. So sometimes I kind of wiggle around a little bit more than it might seem, but just notice, right? Can you feel your feet on the ground? I really need to, because I'm standing. But right, if you're sitting in a chair, right, what does it feel to be rooted into the earth? What is your temperature like now? Are you hot now? Are you noticing later in the conversation you've gotten cold? Pay attention to your body. Do you need to move your body? I think Zoom is great because it can sometimes make things more accessible. It also can help us if you're noticing, hey, wait a second, in order to be present, I want to start knitting, or I need to get up and do some stretches. And if you don't want to be doing those stretches with everyone looking at you, feel free to turn off your camera and do what you need to do so you can be present. Notice as well how you're breathing. Are you breathing? Can you slow down and take that breath? Pause, reflect. We'll be doing that together. Thank you again so much for being here to have this conversation. I know a lot of folks are familiar with Reach Beyond Domestic Violence already, but just wanting to really share if there are some folks in the room who haven't heard about our organization. We are a comprehensive domestic violence agency. We serve 27 cities and towns. Sudbury-Wayland-Lincoln are some of those towns. And we offer lots of different supports and services. So we have our website, which has been newly redone. So you should check it out. Even if you are familiar with Reach, you should go to our website and see it. It's a lot more accessible. We have a 24-hour confidential hotline. We have an online chat that's open Mondays through Fridays. We have a shelter where folks can stay if they need a safe place to stay. An amazing shelter team. We have a community advocacy program. We have a child and adolescent therapist. We have support groups. We have our prevention team, so many different programs. And so please, if folks have questions, feel free to share them in the chat. I'm going to be focused here, but I have some colleagues here who could be definitely answering some questions, and I can also answer some of those as well. Throughout the remainder of the rest of the slides, the Reach hotline will be on the bottom left-hand corner. It's not here right now because it's on the slide, but when I go to the slide, you see that Reach hotline is right there. So if, as we're having this conversation, you're like, hey, wait a second, this is bringing some up for me, I want to talk to someone, know again that it's always available for you. So I like doing things in an interactive way, so I would just love to quickly hear from folks. If you could, in the chat, please share your name, your pronouns. What's something that you want to take away from this workshop? So name, pronouns, what do you want to take away from this workshop? It could be a single word. It could be sentences. I think we can also see and be inspired by what other people are saying too. Hi, Malcolm. Good to see you. Thank you. Listen and learn. Okay. Thank you, Maddie. Okay, so that's a lot, Erica. Those are great questions. We might not be able to get at all of those in our hour-long conversation, but we can, again, this is not the conversation. This is part of a longer dialogue. So it's really great to know that you're interested in these things. All right. How to talk in a comfortable way to continue learning. Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Hannah. All right. So we're going to keep going. I'm gonna keep trying to look at what folks are writing in the chat. I love this idea of continuing learning. I think that's a great frame to enter this conversation. I'm going to go to the next slide, but we'll keep going. So I think, again, I love that a lot of folks are saying, okay, continuing learning. I think my goals of this workshop is really to think about and to explore questions, which to me is learning. So some of the questions that we're thinking about is how can we engage youth in age-appropriate discussions about relationships? Right. So hearing that in the chat as well. How do we support youth as we navigate relationships, and really thinking about as adults, how do we create those spaces where young people are seen, heard, respected? So a couple of things to name, I think I said already, right? By seeing what other people are looking for, that helps inform us, right? How are we entering this conversation? And it begins us to ask those questions of ourselves. Right. I think that's really important, right? When we have these conversations with young people, what are we hoping to take from this? And starting by there. And so just naming some of these goals for the workshop, I think that idea of age appropriate. At Reach, we talk about the idea of meeting people where they are, right? We could be talking about survivors of different ages. We could be talking about young people in general who might be survivors, who might have be witnesses to violence, who might be young people that we're talking with. We're going to meet them where they are. When we're thinking about relationships, I'm really going to encourage us to think broadly. So when we are talking with young people, sometimes I'm like, oh, we talk about relationship with young people, and they're like, when they're really little kids, what sort of relationships? But really, relationships are all the people we interact with our family, with our friends, with coworkers, with classmates, with teammates, maybe with romantic partners, right? We're thinking really broadly. Boundaries and consent, we need those with everybody. So we're going to talk about relationships really broadly. This idea of navigating relationships, right? Young people, it might be the first time, right, they've had relationships, right? As they're growing up, it's the first time they've had these experiences. And so we're also thinking about how, as adults in their lives, we can really model and help talk through, okay, what do relationships look like, feel like? What do we want? What do we not want in these spaces? And really, again, that idea of creating that space so young people can feel seen, heard, respected. Like, I know that I can ask a question of someone and I'm not going to be turned away. They're going to have that space, again, just as all of you are here to learn, to know that we're still learning. And to be able to model that and own that with the young people in our lives is so important. So we can begin to do this by discussing and modeling boundaries. So these are some kind of key themes that we're going to be coming back to a lot. Discussing and modeling boundaries, again, both by really, modeling what are boundaries? What does that look like? What do those look like in our lives? And having explicit conversations about that as we're learning about what do I even want for my boundaries? Combating gender norms and stereotypes, right? The words that we use, the examples that we talk about, the words that we don't use, the examples that we don't talk about, how that can impact young people and make people feel respected, right? And valued as they are. We can do this by practicing healthy communication and really thinking about holding each other accountable with compassion, right? Again, that idea of learning. When we're learning, that's acknowledging that we don't know everything and we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And that's important to be able to own that too. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it back to you again. You do not need to write in the chat for this. I'm just going to ask you, we're going to take 2 minutes to just on your own reflect when you were a kid, whenever that was. Think through these questions. You can think through all of these questions. You can think through some of these. Again, this is just for you, so we can see, okay, where are we? Where have we been? Where are we coming from? So the questions are, what did you want to be when you grew up? I wanted to be a professional soccer player. What were your dreams or wishes? What were you afraid of? Who was your best friend? Why? Lauren Brill, another Lauren Brill, because we like to go adventuring in streams together. How did you show someone you liked them, or how did you flirt with them when you were 6, when you were 16? So let's take, I'm going to set a timer. We're just going to take 2 minutes if you want to write it down so you can reflect back on it, whatever makes sense. We're not going to be sharing these out. We're just going to be doing this to center ourselves. I'm setting 2 minutes. So about 30 more seconds if you needed to reflect on these questions when you were a kid. All right, so that timer is just, all right. Oh, I repeated it, cancel. Okay, we're good. All right, so let's just pause. Let's take a deep breath. Just think about how that felt, right? When we were that age. And again, we're at various distances away from whenever we felt that we were kids. But asking these questions again to bring us back, to think about that, what was important to us then? How deeply did we feel about relationships? And I think it is really important to remember that each person is the expert in their own reality. And just because someone is 7 years old doesn't mean that the intensity of their emotions are any less valid, right? So that's another really important thing to think about. Think about how much we cared about our best friends, how deeply we felt about our relationships, or the secrets that we told each other, or all of that. Just really, again, honoring that, whatever we're feeling, wherever we are at that stage in our life, that's where that person is. And I realized I forgot to ask this question, but just acknowledging that, I asked, okay, so name, pronouns, what are you hoping for? I didn't ask kind of, what is your connection to young people? And just also want to name, again, the different ways that we may be connected to young people. We may be educators or advocates. We may be a parent or guardian, or grandparent or teacher, or so many different ways, or advisor or mentor. There's so many different types of relationships that we may have. So just also wanting to name, right, that we're entering this conversation from different ways. So really, again, enter from where you are. How does this apply to you? And so as we enter these conversations, I would love to actually continue thinking about this. If a couple of folks might want to unmute and just really quickly share, maybe one person for each question. Again, what would make a good friend? And we were thinking about, okay, when we were a child, what did we think? What do we think now? What would make a good friend? What would make a healthy romantic relationship? And then that last question, what makes it challenging to talk about these things? So if I could have maybe one person unmute for each question, if you feel more moved or able or willing to share in the chat, please feel free to do that. Would love to hear from folks. What would make a good friend? Let's start with that. What makes a good friend?
Well, I'll go. I think somebody is a good friend if they can take my crazy and still love me past that, even if they know that I'm, not always so perfect that I'd like to think I am.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you for sharing. And right, yeah, I mean, thinking about, right, take all of who we are, right? All of our strengths, all of maybe our areas where we can grow, if we feel so. Okay, someone I can share my secrets with. Okay, yeah. So I think as well, everyone would answer this question differently, probably, right? Does anyone want to really quickly share what would make a healthy romantic relationship? Mutual respect. Sue, thanks. Boundaries, thanks, Sydney. Okay. So again, we all would answer this differently. And then let's just I really want to explore as well, what makes it challenging to talk about relationships? Oh, wow. Thanks, Maddie. People feel loved and cared for and cared about in different ways. Open communication, right? Yeah, we have different ways of showing people how we care for them, or different love languages, right? Or different ways of showing how we care about others. Okay. Different perspectives on many things, right? Yeah, right. How is this person going to respond, right? Are we aligned, or what is that? Yeah, thanks, Bianca. Okay. I don't know what to say, right? I hear that all the time. I don't know what to say. I don't know how they're going to respond. You know, what if they think I'm being too mean or punitive, or, you know, so many different sorts of things, right? Or they think I'm judging them, right? There's so many different things. And so really hoping today to talk through some strategies of how to have these conversations, acknowledging that there are barriers that we face and challenges, but beginning to talk through some of those barriers can help demystify them. What we're going to be doing, we're using as a frame these resources from Reach Beyond Domestic Violence. Lauren just put them in the chat. This is the general page. So if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you can look here, you can click on them. If you do want physical copies, Lauren, you're great, mailed, you can reach out to Lauren and she can mail them to you. But as we have this conversation, if you want to follow along on your own screen, you can do that. I am going to be sharing them up on the screen as well. Okay, so we're going to get into it. So I have a question for everyone. So Lauren is going to Lauren is great at technology. Okay, so if you could please really quickly answer this poll. Should a child have to hug a relative they rarely see? Yes, no, or it depends. All right, we're waiting on two people. Ready? Let's end that poll. Perfect. All right, and so I can do this. Let's do it. Oops, share results. Can you see it? Okay. So we have 59% no, 41% it depends. So does anyone who wrote it depends want to share in the chat? And also, that's okay. We can kind of keep going. But does anyone really quickly want to share in the chat or unmute? We have no and it depends. Should a child have to hug a relative they rarely see?
I put down it depends, just because now it doesn't matter, my kids are a little bit older, but when they were younger and our relatives live in another country or on the other side of the United States, and they might not have seen them that frequently. So it was a little bit uncomfortable maybe when they would occasionally see them. And I totally told them that, you know, this is your grandma or this is Aunt Susie or whatever, just go ahead and give a hug. So.
Okay, yeah, and also right, hearing like it can feel really complicated as well. I think family is the thing that comes up a lot when I'm talking in the classroom with young people. Kind of what are the expectation, what are the cultural norms, that is brought up a lot. How are we communicating boundaries and consent? Are we having conversations with young people? Okay, what are you okay with? What are you not okay with? And starting that conversation even really early, to be able to build that sort of conversation into a dialogue, right? If we make a decision for young people, we are taking away that choice from them. And so how do we help young people build the idea of bodily autonomy and choice into their vocabularies, right? No, I don't want that. Or yeah, I do want to hug this person, and knowing that it is a choice for young people, and acknowledging, right, again, within the context of a family, we have to be having those conversations, and it's all part of a process. We could talk through this example a lot, but I do want to share some of these some of these tips. And just to acknowledge, right, thank you, Lauren. So if you do want these specific ones, we can look here. So boundaries and consent, that's the first thing that came up. And Hannah, thank you so much for sharing that example. I think it can be really tricky and named, right, talking about gender and gender norms. I think with boundaries and young people as well, it's a really great time to really combat what are the norms or expectations. So who is allowed to have boundaries in society? Who is said like, oh, you know, just like be a little good little girl and hug them, right? And so the different language that is said and then reinforces ideas and beliefs and behaviors for young people, being like, oh, because of this, you know, because I'm a good little girl, I want to be a good little girl because, you know, the adults in my life, they say it in such a positive way. And so I really should do this because that's what they said, instead of saying, okay, what would you want in this situation? I think that's something when we're looking at talking with young people. I mean, 3 to 6 is pretty young. Using really concrete examples, that can be really helpful. So developing skills. So instead of having like a large hypothetical question, saying, okay, so what if so-and-so is chasing you in around the playground and they hit you? Right. So instead of saying, if someone hurts you, tell me, right, we could say, okay, so what if you're on the playground, they chase you and then they hit you? What are some things that we can do? And talking through specific examples. I think as well, you can use movies, TV shows to really be able to say, okay, so in what's a movie that a 3-year-old would watch, right? In a movie that we watched the other day, right? We were watching this movie. What did you think? Frozen, right? Okay, so I've never seen it, sorry. But so in Frozen, right? Okay, so the relationship with sisters, right? Let's talk about that. Okay, what if you had a sister that was like that? How would you interact in that situation? That's like a really real, I'm using air quotes here, a really real example for these young people. I think other things to consider is really when we're talking about relationship, really normalizing it. Again, this idea that it's not just one-time conversation, right? We are imparting values and behaviors to the people in our lives at all times, right? Young or old, right? The way that we interact with each other models to them, okay, this is how I act with you. So Lauren is my colleague. I've been working with her for 4 years, right? When we interact with each other, that models to, okay, we can talk about this sort of, you know, we can talk about relationships in the context of work. We can talk about this. We can build trust because we're having these conversations. It's normalized. With young people, it can be really helpful to almost like schedule a time for yourself. So it is consistent. So it's not just like, because sometimes if we want to have a conversation, we might be like, oh, wow, this came up and I'm really concerned about this. And then we can have that conversation and it can feel really reactive and punitive or judgmental. But so if we schedule times in advance, they don't need to know that, okay, on Thursdays at 3:30, I'm going to be talking with them about relationships. But every time when I pick them up and we're driving to swim practice or whatever, oh, let's talk about this thing together. And so we can have that built in. I think, again, talking about boundaries, saying no, the idea that it's okay to say no, and we don't have to apologize for that, really early on feels so important. I spend a lot of time talking with teenagers and just kind of hearing so many times people saying sorry or not feeling like they're able to say no or feel guilty about saying no to various things, right? Just building that again into the conversation. It's okay to say no, and it can be really important. And then another piece around safety, right? Thinking about that they're adults for young people, right? Helping them identify who are those adults in their lives who are there to help keep them safe, to protect them. Who could they turn to for help? So, right, again, what if you have a question at school? What if you have a question at soccer practice? Who could you talk to about that, right? And building that awareness of resources as we go along. I can keep going. There's so much to cover. Is it okay if I keep going? Do folks have questions or comments before we go on to our next poll? Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi. This is great. Thank you. I just wanted to add to this also. I feel like adults are often really quick to put labels and kind of pair up little kids who hang out with each other who are different genders. And so immediately, you know, a little girl is playing with a little boy, that's her boyfriend. And so adults also have an opportunity. So first of all, that's assuming a lot about what that little girl is going to want in life. But it also takes away the possibility of normalizing friendships across genders that are healthy, that if you're connected with somebody, we're immediately putting a bunch of social assumptions on top of that kid and then creating a label and a relationship that isn't necessarily there. And so I feel like it's something with 3 to 6 year olds, just the idea that they can be friends with lots of different kids in lots of different ways, instead of kind of immediately making that connection and putting that very adult or at least older kid adult language on their relationship.
Thank you so much for naming that. Yeah, right. So many times, right, we hear like, oh, so-and-so was playing with someone on the playground. They're dating now. It's their little, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend. Absolutely, absolutely pushing back against that. Thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation. Let's go to the next poll. There is so much. We're talking about kids across, you know, the lifespan. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's go to the next poll. We're going to do this kind of quickly. So the next poll is, does a parent or guardian have the right to go into a child's room? Again, same responses. Yes, no, it depends, or same choices. All right, we have about half people participated. All right, a couple more. Let's close that poll. All right. Okay, so the numbers have shifted a little bit. So we have 29% yes, 71% it depends. Could we hear a couple of people share out, again, either in the chat or unmute, can sometimes be quicker. Anyone want to share?
I'm happy to share. I said yes. I feel like as a parent, I have a right to go into my child's bedroom. That is like just one more way of making sure that, you know, they're safe, depending on, you know, like obviously my kids are a little bit younger, so younger, sorry. So I'm not looking for drugs or anything at this time. I just want to get them used to the idea that we don't have secrets in our house, and you have private things, which is fine, and they keep their privacy, and I don't just barge in, but at the same time they know that, you know what, mom might come and, you know, take a look at my phone or whatever when they're there. I would, yeah, I don't know, but I definitely think yes.
Okay, thanks, Hannah, and thank you for getting it started. Does anyone else want to share? Maybe somebody from the it depends category.
I don't mind sharing. So I kind of grew up, my mom and I had like very good boundaries. So knowing that when I was frustrated or feeling overwhelmed, she would give me time to like be in my room alone without needing to worry about everybody else in my household. So I picked it depends because I feel like it depends on the situation and the age of the child as well.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Sydney and Hannah. I think, again, I am hearing intention. I'm hearing about boundaries and communication, which again is one of our themes, right? Really thinking about what are the boundaries we have, the importance of setting them and communicating them. Hannah, I'm hearing as well this idea of intention. It's not just like I'm coming in whenever I feel like, because I feel like it whenever, but really framing it maybe around that conversation of, okay, the reason why is, let's think about what safety looks like, and having that conversation again in advance instead of, again, having it be this reactive model. There's so many different ways that, you know, that we could talk about this, thinking about how sometimes people say things like, oh, because I'm your parent, and then how that can feel if somebody's coming in versus I care about your safety, I want to see how you are. That feels really different to me if somebody said that to me. Okay, so again, there are so many different directions that we could go with these conversations. And I'm seeing in the chat, sorry, I hadn't seen this. All right. Yeah, it depends on the age. You want to build trust. If a child does, so building the boundaries and trust to make my children are safe, to make sure what I'm asking. Yeah. So, and again, right, that acknowledging, okay, maybe, right, boundary shift and change, right? Boundaries aren't okay, we have a boundary. This is the boundary that we've set forever. And that is necessarily what it's going to be forever, right? They shift and change over time. Okay, so now we're at the 7 to 10 age. Thanks, Lauren. Again, if you want to see those, they are in the chat. When we're looking to 7 to 10, we're really thinking again about defining and beginning to define terms, right? So beginning to define terms and boundaries and having those conversations together. Really, when we're doing this, acknowledging, right? So on this, it says, okay, talking about dating, boyfriend, girlfriend, relationship. What terms are we using? Are we describing what it could mean if you use the term partner? Are we talking about pronouns here? Are we talking about gender and sexual orientation? You know, we're saying, okay, what does it mean to be non-binary or gender fluid, right? Are we having these conversations? I think there's, if we're talking about terms, if we're talking about language and vocabulary, there's such an opportunity to be open and to explore. And there's also a really strong possibility if we don't do that. If we say, okay, we're only going to talk about this, we're not going to talk about LGBTQ identities or different sexual orientations, right? If we choose to not do that, that also sends a message that's really powerful to young people. And it's important, again, to really follow the lead of the young people to explore together with them, okay, what does this mean as we're figuring this out? I think, again, that goes into modeling by doing, modeling by having conversations around boundaries, around communication, around, you know, maybe we're talking about terms and we're not super familiar with them or what they mean. That's okay. We're learning together. But again, being able to own that when we're thinking about accountability, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about that. I think that's it's important to you. So I want to find out more so I can have this conversation with you so we can talk about this together. We're also thinking about, okay, what do young people want? Starting to have those conversations. I think 7 to 10 young people, they're starting to think about, okay, friendships, maybe romantic relationships. Again, people talk in lots of different, you know, lots of different ages about these things, but what do people want? What would people want in a friendship? What are the questions that you can ask to encourage the young people in your lives to think about? Wait, what would make a relationship healthy to me, right? That question that I asked you at the beginning, what would make a relationship healthy to you? Let's talk through it. What could we think about? And then also, so we're thinking about what do we want? And then we're really thinking about what do we do? So strategizing, again, thinking about boundary setting. How do I say no? What does that look like? If a friend of mine asks me to hang out with them after school, but I know that they don't wear a mask when they're inside and I don't feel comfortable with that. How do I say no to that? Right. And knowing that I can do that. So building some of those skills and strategies, practicing that. I love role playing, right? So, okay. So if, you know, if Sue said this to me, or if Sue said this to you, how would you respond? And practice saying that, right? And then also, again, always going back to identifying those resources. Who could they talk to? I think it can be really hard, especially if there's somebody that we care about in our lives, a young person. So I advise a student club at Waltham High School called PAVE, Peers Against Violence Educators, and I love working with them. And I tell them, if you do have questions, you can reach out to me. And I know as an adult in their lives, I may not be the person that they want to talk to about something, and that's okay. I think it's really important as adults who care about young people in our lives to be able to say it doesn't have to be us. Right? Sometimes what we're doing is helping young people identifying resources, or, oh, is there a guidance counselor at the school you would feel comfortable talking with? Or, oh, I've heard you talk about your coach really highly. Is that someone who you would want to reach out to? They're showing us the trust by having those conversations with us, and we're showing them the trust to say, it's okay for you to talk to someone else too, or instead of me, it's okay. I just want you to be talking to someone. Any thoughts before our next poll? Comments, questions, thoughts? Okay. Oh, somebody already mentioned this. So does a parent or guardian have a right to look through their child's phone? We're going to do a super quick poll for this one. All right, let's go. We have 12 out of 19 folks, 13 have participated. Let's get a couple more people. It's anonymous. All right, I have one more. Let's close it in 3, 2, and 1. Okay. All right. So we have some yes, some no. We have the majority, it depends. So I want to hear from 2 people, what could it depend on? Maybe someone whose voice we haven't heard yet, either in the chat or on mute.
I can touch on this a little as a young folk. When I was in high school, my parents and I talked about like boundaries with like my cell phone, and it was kind of like back and forth. And like, my mom would be like, well, I pay for the bill, so like I should be able to look at it. And then like we kind of had this like ongoing conversation that like, okay, well, like if you have like concerns about like my safety, like that's a reason to look. But other than that, like I'm my own person, and like I should like be able to like use my phone in a way that like I have like autonomy with. So that's kind of like where I feel like it depends. It's like if it's like their safety at risk,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing. Yeah, I think, and again, I'm hearing as well, just like conversations around safety, intention, what is the intention behind it, explaining that, right? It feels really different to hear somebody say, oh, it's because I pay the bills, versus I'm concerned about your safety. I want to have conversations about what would make you feel safe, or what would be safe or not. Also seeing some stuff in the chat. Yeah, Hannah?
Well, I was gonna just add that also, I mean, the kids are growing up, and they don't really have necessarily the awareness to know that not everything that can be accessed on a phone is good. And sometimes it's nothing. Like I've had, one of my kids, my oldest one, was part of a group chat that there was some inappropriate things in it. He wasn't contributing anything to it, but he was also not speaking against it. So then that was a way for us to have a conversation that, okay, I know you're not contributing anything, but your silence is also just kind of saying yes to this. Mm-hmm. So he ended up saying that his mother found the chat and got upset, and he has to leave the chat. And I told him that's totally fine to say if that's how you want to deal with it. And then, and his friends were surprisingly understanding. They said, oh, got it. Yeah, no worries. And I think it was just a good example of like, I'm not there to necessarily dictate how you can use the phone, but at the same time, I want to try to educate you how to use it appropriately.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that example. I think I hear, kind of points of when we can ask or build critical thinking skills, right? That sort of, okay, so this is happening. How do you think these actions or the things that people are saying could be impacting other people? How does your inaction, right? Like how is being there contributing to what is going on? So there's different kind of ways of interacting. I also say that to young people all the time, right? Using, I know my parents said that to me as well. If you ever need me as an excuse, do it, right? Like, oh yeah, like, my parents say that I can't, stay out after 10 o'clock or whatever, like whatever it is, right? Being able to use that, whether or not that's actually true, right? Sometimes it is really hard, right? For young people to feel like I can just say no, or I can just leave, right? And so having those conversations around what would make you feel able to say no in that sort of situation. I think I do want to comment, somebody put in the chat something about so Erica, right? So I know that there are parents or guardians that are abusive and use controlling tactics. I think, right, how that can be used, I think as well, how sometimes if we are kind of just saying like, well, we can look at your phone, or we can track your location, or things like that, without like a larger context, it can be really challenging, again, as young people are navigating relationships for the first time. If they have an abusive partner or a friend who may be saying those same types of things, right? I should be able to look through your phone, right? You trust me, right? They may be saying the same sorts of things that an adult may be saying. And so being able to have those conversations and really talking about what are digital boundaries, right? What would be okay? If it's like a question around safety, right? Sometimes with parents, right? I wanted to know, where you are, if you're okay, but like, does your 13-year-old partner need to know where you are at all times, right? And so being able to differentiate and have those conversations about, okay, what is okay? What feels safe or not? So when we go to this, the 11 to 14 part of it, as how we started, we're reflecting on our own values. We're acknowledging, right, that when we're talking about friendships, relationships, any sort of relationship that we have, romantic relationship, there's not like a perfect relationship, right? But what we really want is a respectful relationship where each person can be who they are, right? So I can show up and I can express myself in the ways that I want. I can love whomever I want. And I can do that and be respected and valued. And that violence is never okay in the context of relationships. With these, 11 to 14, and I think really with all of them, I think a lot about active listening. So that idea of we are drawn in so many different directions in our lives. But just really thinking about if I'm carving out the time to have a conversation with someone, not multitasking, not be like, oh, I'm just writing this email, or oh, I'm doing this thing, but really being present for them, giving your full attention, starting that conversation, expressing that you care about what they're saying, and then asking clarifying questions, right? It can be really confusing for young people. They're in transitional stages of their lives, and it can be confusing for us. We don't have all the answers. So being able to say, hey, you named this, you used this term, you were talking about this. What did you mean what I said? This is what I'm hearing, but am I getting it right? I want to make sure that I can be here to support you in the way that you need. So asking those sorts of conversations. And again, having them kind of reflect on what do they want, right, in their relationships. What would make them feel happy? Relationships are supposed to be fun, right? So what would they want in their relationships? And once again, identifying those resources. So this one, we're gonna keep going. This is our last poll. We're just gonna answer it and then kind of go on. So at what age is it okay for young people to start dating? So the options 3 to 6, 7 to 10, 11 to 14, 15 to 18, 18 or older. Okay. Let's let's close it in 3, 2, 1. Let's close. Okay. So we have 11 to 14, 46%, and then 15 to 18, 54%. Okay, so kind of define dating. Great, right? So one of those terms, right? One of it, I was right, 7 to 10, right? We say, okay, define terms, right? Dating. What does dating mean? So I guess I'll just say the reason why I'm asking these poll questions are because I feel like these are questions that young people kind of ask or think about all the time, right? Or as adults, we're thinking about these all the time. Wait, okay, what should I do? Can I go into this child's room? Or a child being like, wait a second, why did they go into my room? I feel like I should talk with them about this, right? So all of these are various questions, right, that feel really applicable, that are confusing, that we want to talk through. And so I think, again, I'm not going to define dating for you right now. I think that that's okay, you know, with the young people in our lives, let's talk about that. What does that mean? There's an activity that I do sometimes in classrooms, and it's like relationship terms, and we do that, we define, right? What are the expectations for, if you say we're dating, what does that mean? How are we communicating? What sort of boundaries do we have? What roles do people have in that? What does conflict look like, right? So yes, so we should define it, and I would encourage you, again, that's a conversation to have. So I'm thinking about dating, you know, just wanted to talk about it. What does that mean to you, right? And we'll go from there. So I'm going to go into that because one of the, this first bullet point on here is, right, kind of tell them what you did, right? Thinking about, okay, what does dating mean? You know, the term was used like this back in the day when I was dating. This is what dating meant, right? What does it mean to you? Right. So really, again, drawing on kind of where are you coming from, not acting as though I'm just this person and I'm showing up out of nowhere, but really saying, okay, this is, you know, kind of this is where I'm coming from, but I really want to focus on you. So we can be okay with them being quiet, right? Because what we're doing is really trying to create that space for young people to feel like they can come to us with questions, right? If we have created that space when we're asking young people, what do you want? How do you feel in your relationship? With respect at the foundation of those relationships, and we can create those spaces for young people. They'll feel like, wait, I can go to this person and I can ask questions. I can share something, but maybe I messed up. Or maybe I was in a situation where I felt uncomfortable, or maybe I was in a situation and like, I don't know how this adult would feel about it. But because we've created this non-judgmental space, we've been constantly, since they were, you know, 0 years old, or 3 to 6, or however old, however since you've known them, building those moments of reflecting on relationships, be able to say, hey, how's it going? And to know that that young person can respond with the good and the bad. Because if we create a culture where a young person is like, well, I can't actually share what's going on because I'm afraid how they're going to respond. I'm afraid that they're going to get mad at me. I'm afraid that they're going to judge me. I'm afraid that they're going to punish me. Then they're not going to show the thing. They're not going to share, you know, the bad things where they might need help. And they might also not share the good things that they're really happy about because they don't want to share any of it. So really, again, thinking about talking, listening, providing that space to listen. Again, I'll say it 1,000 times, boundaries, thinking about no as a complete sentence. And that may mean saying, hey, you know, Molly, I don't want to talk to you today. That's okay. And identifying, okay, who are those people, again, that you can talk to, can provide that support for you. And so as we wrap up today, just really wanting to think about remembering to review what we talked about, right? So these are the themes. And when we're having conversation with young people, this can be a really helpful framework as well. Review what you talked about. These are the things that we talked about today, but what did we talk about today? I want to express gratitude to you all here for taking the time on a lovely Tuesday afternoon to have this conversation. But right, thank you for having the space for questions, for conversation, for dialogue, because we really have to remember and understand that trust and relationships and trusting relationships, right? I think what we're looking for with the young people in our lives, in whatever capacity we work with these young people, they're built in these small moments. How do we show up? What are the words we use? How are we being inclusive with pronouns? What sorts of examples are we talking about? How are we listening to someone? How are we being present and following their lead? All of that is so, so important. And it's a process over time. And so I want to end just really quickly. I want you to reflect on this as we're leaving. I've said so many times, talking with young people about identifying the resources. It's really hard to talk with young people, again, in whatever capacity that is. It can be challenging. It can be scary. It can be sad. There's so many different things. It can be uplifting. Just really encouraging folks to think about, who are your resources when you're having conversations? Who are the people that you can talk to? Is it an organization? Is it a friend? Is it a colleague? Is it a family member? What does that look like in your life? And then just to close, I would love to hear how will you apply some of today's conversation to your life? It could be, I still have questions and I'm going to continue looking on those questions. That's great, right? That's part of the process. But how will you apply today's conversation to your life? If you could share that in the chat, I'd love to hear from you as we close for today. Keep on learning. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Molly. Thank you so much. That was excellent. I'm deep in thought, and particularly as a woman of an age now when she has 3 adult children. I have 3 adult children. As so often, I wish I could have a rerun because I've learned so much. And in fact, some of this still applies to conversations that I have with young adults now. It's still the same. But I think it's because I continue to learn from people like Molly that I have better conversations with a lot of other people now, not just with children or younger people. Well, my kids are younger, but not as young as the groups that Molly's been talking about today. And there are certainly skills that I've learned from people like Molly and her colleagues at Reach and other organizations that have enabled me to keep those communication channels open. And I think it was Maddie who said in the chat, when the question was, it was challenging to talk about relationships, that people feel loved and cared about or for in different ways. And the key is that open communication. And I do agree with her very much. I mean, from a personal experience, I had a troubled child, and I just kept on being there, and just kept on being there, and just kept on being, being someone he could talk to. And it wasn't always very easy because other family members felt that that I shouldn't have been doing that because I was enabling or whatever. So, it's never a right answer to these things. But I had to keep communication going with those people who were judging what I was doing as well. It's complicated and it's very difficult. And I think you couldn't pay me enough money to be a teenager again. And I think it's such a difficult time anyway, without any added traumas or pressures. So thank you, Molly. That was a very, very interesting session. I've learned a lot and taken lots of notes. And if any of you would like to be, or firstly, join with me, please, in thanking Molly for being here this afternoon. And also, if you'd like to learn more about our future programming, if you just let us know, give us your email address. You can leave it in the chat, or you can email us at our own email, and we'll put you on our mailing lists, and you'll be informed of any upcoming program or programs or other events. And also, we are particularly short of people at the moment to drop off hotline cards. And Here is a picture of my daughter's thumb holding a hotline card. I thought Lauren questioned it and said, do you want the thumb taken off? And I said, no, Lauren, I was trying to personalize it. This is a volunteer hand holding a hotline card. But we very much want people, need people to drop these off in publicly accessed private spots, so mostly bathrooms, in buildings in the 3 towns. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to take very many. You could just drop 2 or 3 off, you know, once every 3 months or whatever. But if you are interested in joining the very brave souls that do this all the time, the courageous souls go out in all weathers to drop off our hotline cards, we'd very much appreciate your help. And you can contact us again through our email. And I put this photograph there so you'd see what I was talking about, because someone said the other day, you keep mentioning hotline cards, what are they? So I thought, you know, I'd reveal some for you, see what they look like. So with that, I think I would just say goodbye to you all. The light is still shining, the sun is just setting. Enjoy the rest of the lovely day, and thank you, Molly, and thank you all so much for attending.